Portland. He's currently working as an addictions therapist and participating in various ways with members of the MINT community, learning the ropes of becoming a high-quality MI trainer. Kevin walked with several teachers in shaping his voice as a therapist, retreat leader, and speaker, drawing on diverse traditions. Clinical training followed, and Kevin now focuses his energy on integrating this traditional spirit into professional practice. He is currently working closely with members of the Motivational Interviewing network of trainers to this end. And with that, I want to give it over to Kevin Tomlin. Thank you for being so gracious, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. What a lovely intro. And that's actually perfect because I'm about to make the same demonstration of PowerPoint because Steve just gave me a crash course in how to do this kind of view of slides. So I see that in the chat, thank you for reminding me about the chat because I remember last time we did this, there's awesome questions that come up. So if one of you guys could watch for me, just if there are questions, flag me down, okay? Because that really is what, to me, that's what makes a good MI talk, presentation, training, is when we all get engaged over this stuff. And it's a little weird. We're in a weird time with COVID, pandemics. We're coming on a year, which is kind of trippy to think about. But I'm really interested in your guys' experience of motivational interviewing, particularly in this context. Okay, so Puget Sound, there's so many great words, just Salish-based words up in the Pacific Northwest. The one that I usually use already got named by Debbie Hartzell, who's in Oklahoma right now. She is Puyallup. Puyallup, P-U-Y-A-L-L-U-P. Puyallup. Can you help me find Puyallup? I got that so many times. I used to live in Tacoma, so thank you for that example. I'm still trying to button my shirt because, you know, I don't know about you, but I'm working from home and it's showing. I share a wall with my 21-month-old. He's not in there right now, so, but he probably will go in for a nap at some point, and that could be really interesting. Anyway, since I'm just a talking head, I'm just going to keep myself moving. So we're going to get going into these slides. Okay. Here we go. I'm sharing. Sharing is happening. And I'm going to go. There we go. There is the cover slide. So evoking power in seasons of uncertainty. These are, what you're going to get here is the lightning round of MI. My understanding is that this is a 2-part series. At least I'm planning for that. So I'll be back here on February 17th if anyone wants to come, where my hope is that we can address as much of the theory, as much of, you know, the classroomy portions of motivational interviewing that we need to do in order to feel like that we have a snapshot of what it is. It's actually very simple. And then from that point, somehow to do some demonstration to, and this may be in the second session. I mean, part of what MI is that it's very flexible. So my intention is to kind of embody the style of motivational interviewing throughout both of these sessions, usually in a training that kind of comes forward because there's multiple human beings in the room. It's kind of important to have more than one person in a conversation when it comes to motivational interviewing. So this gets challenging, but I've figured out a way to use the chat when I'm able to see it to like kind of demonstrate some of the basic skills that are a huge part of MI. So seasons of uncertainty, pandemics, evoking power. The operative word for motivational interviewing is evoking. And that's really, if there's nothing else you take away from any MI training or talk, it is the word evoke. evocation, evoking, evoke. That is the action of motivational interviewing. It is the aspect of MI that makes it distinct from any other type of approach. It's the thing that makes it unique. And that's what these slides are going to get at. So I'm confident that most of you have heard of MI. If you haven't, if you feel like you are brand new, if you could just throw into the chat on that, and unfortunately I can't see it. So if you guys could like tell me if somebody says that, like that it's brand new, they are saying it's brand new or not yet. So we are going to go over this, right? My presumption is most people at least know it exists, okay? Just because it's been around since 1983. It actually started in the late 70s when a classically trained psychotherapist named Bill Miller was doing some research. He was actually amongst the Zuni people, it's my understanding, in New Mexico. And I don't know what he was doing there, but it wasn't working. Whatever research he was doing wasn't working out. And his classical training, though, is in person-centered counseling. So he fell back on that and he just basically fell into what he knew, which is how to be a human being clinically with other human beings. And that kind of formed his training, and he ended up in addiction fields. So in the late 70s, early 80s, maybe you had an experience of this, what treatment was like back then versus how it's like now. Let's just say it was very different. It was in its infancy. So there was a lot of stuff that we don't do now, right? Generally speaking, you could say like the tone of it was different. It was kind of like, I've heard the phrase, we're going to tear you down so we can build you back up again, right? It was very directive. It was almost authoritarian. Now, were all of them? I don't know. But in general, that's what it was referred to. And so this guy finds himself in the middle of one of these treatment centers being a person-centered therapist, which is very, very different. It's like being very reflective, asking a lot of open-ended questions, taking the attitude of a curious person, right? So he's not telling people what to do. He's starting to listen to them and just delivering that unconditional positive regard that is just the core of being a person-centered Rogerian counselor. What he noticed was in the staff meetings, he would listen to the other staff talk about clients, and he was confused because he thought he knew all the clients and that they were talking about somebody that has the same name of the client he's working with, but it's not the same person. And then he realized that they actually are talking about the same people. It's just that their perspective, their attitude, even their experience of the person is completely different. So fast forward, he's on sabbatical. He's taken a year-long academic break. He's in Norway. He demonstrates counseling for these postdocs, PhD babies who are going to be psychologists. And he is engaging somebody on addiction counseling. And in the Q&A afterwards, he describes feeling, kind of interrogated by the students because they're asking him things like, how were you so effective at doing that? Why did you say this right here instead of what I would usually say? And it got him to thinking, and as he says, they evoked it from him. Those students evoked from him what we now call motivational interviewing. What he was doing, it turns out, was he was drawing out of the person their own reasons to change. So instead of telling them what to do or why to do it, he would just engage the person until it kind of warmed up the conversation enough that the person would offer it to him. And now that's way oversimplifying things, but in general, evocation is the watchword for MI. So my plan for today is to get over the basics and investigate some, what the research says. At this point, since then, 1,200 plus 1,200 plus controlled clinical trials. It is an evidence-based practice. This is probably part of why you've seen the phrase motivational interviewing all over the place. Practitioner's definition. This is right out of the book. It never helps for me to do this, but I'll hold up the book. I don't have the cover on it. There's no dust jacket. So motivational interviewing. If you get very interested in this, I highly recommend purchasing the text. So on page 29 of this book, it says, motivational interviewing is a person-centered counseling style for addressing the common problem of ambivalence about change. So no evocation in there, but there is another word that is directly related, ambivalence. Ambivalence, having mixed feelings about making a change, feeling two ways about something simultaneously. Ambivalence is the context out of which motivational interviewing is most effective. It is designed for clients who experience ambivalence about making change. And I'll talk more about that as we go through. So video demonstration. Here's where I'm going to try to share a video. So I think I stopped sharing this one, and then I'm going to switch over and share again for this video. Okay. So bear with me here. I think everybody can still hear me. And I'm going to go over to, did we have any questions yet? Just to check in on that.
Yeah, so people are wondering what the text info is, what edition, author.
Oh, so good. So good. Now, can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So yes, thank you for that question. So it's 2013, Motivational Interviewing is the name of the text. It's the 3rd edition. There's 3 editions of the text. You want the 3rd edition. Why? The 3rd edition represents a significant change in the language of motivational interviewing. The moves have stayed exactly the same. Motivational interviewing from the 1st edition to the 3rd edition, when you observe it, it is exactly the same. The research that has come out and their understandings of how ambivalence works, how change works in people, has led them to change their jargon. They changed their language about motivational interviewing. We get into this a bit in the slides, but a classic example is resistance. Most people, you know, the heart of motivational interviewing happened really in the 2nd edition. The 1st edition was geared solely toward substance use treatment. They then found out over about 10 years that it was highly applicable, not only to that kind of change, but any kind of human change about which somebody feels ambivalent, and that the clinician has an ethical obligation to help that person change, right? So in other words, it can't be, I'm ambivalent about what I want to have for dinner, right? That, as a clinician, I don't want to put my name on that decision. I don't want to get involved in helping guide that person to eat pulled pork sandwich over spaghetti, even though the pulled pork is the right answer, because it's just ethically neutral. So we're talking about changes that improve a person's life in a clinical way. That's the clinical perspective on MI, okay? It's a guiding approach. So resistance is now looked at differently. It's called ambivalence or discord, and I'll get into that later, but that's one example. There was another question.
Yeah, the author.
Sorry, William Miller.
Okay.
William Miller and Stephen Rolnick. I can type those in here, I think. Wait, I'm on a shared screen, sorry.
Oh, I got it in there. And
Okay.
I will also post an Amazon link in case anyone really wants to order it right now.
Oh my, I don't even get a cut of that. But no, I definitely recommend it because it's everything that I'm going to present is a distillation of that. Oh, okay. I need to just be right here where I can see the chat. I want to share a little bit of a video. So here's the setup, because I know that you know, $62. No, No, you don't pay $62 for the book. It shouldn't be $62. I hope not anyway. There's got to be something used out there. So I'm just looking at these chats. This is great. So by the way, I'm seeing like Huntsville, Alabama. I saw Oklahoma. I forget. We're all over the place. This is awesome. I love doing this. I'm also watching my time. We have until, well, we got time. We got plenty of time. So here's the setup for this video. Sweden, I think it was 4 years ago. Some artists, video artists in Sweden got an idea, and they needed just the general public. They needed people to sign up for this thing, because here's what they wanted to do. They wanted to see what would happen if people agreed to stand on a 10-meter high tower, high dive, an Olympic-sized swimming pool. There's water in the pool, so it's all legit. Everybody is aware of this, and they asked them out of their own free will, would you like to do this? We will even pay you. Pick a number, like $60, something like that. So, and it's a Craigslist ad, the Swedish version of Craigslist. Anyone, if you would like to make $60 and you're willing to be filmed jumping off of a high dive into a swimming pool, we'll pay you first, and you don't even have to jump. You just gotta try it. And they got, of course, people like, hell yeah, I'm gonna do that. 10 meters, we gotta translate that into American, 30 feet, something like that. So, okay, yeah, into a swimming pool, I'll do it. So here's what happened. I'm just gonna, it's 16 minutes long. So I'm just gonna play one of, by the way, I wanted to also add, this is Sweden. So just draw up into your mind who you are expecting to see here. Swedish people, right? So here I go. Let's hope this works. You guys seeing that?
Yep, we're seeing that.
All right, here we go. Let's play like a minute or so. So they already got paid. Now they're being filmed, and they got to jump. See that? That's good. What do you imagine is going on in that mind right now? You know? It's impossible. Oh, fist bump. There you go. Oh, shit. Okay, so how long was that cut? How long did it take that guy to get out of the pool and climb back up the stairs? That guy's been standing there the whole time, torturing himself. My head says go, but my heart says no. Perfect. We're going to stop it right there. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to just me. Okay. So chat room, thoughts. I'd like to attempt to evoke some thoughts. And we're talking about MI here. So why did I just show that? What are your thoughts about this? Impressions, anything? Too funny. Okay, yeah. Oh, so people can speak too? Oh, okay, right on. There, thank you, Elaine. Relatable. This is exactly how clients feel. You have to convince yourself that the risk is worth the chance. Ambivalence. Empathize. There we go. We're on it. So they never use the word ambivalence, as far as I can tell. The artists who made this, I actually haven't read much about it, but the title of it is 10-meter tower. Pros and cons, Steve. That's exactly it. I mean, that's what that conversation between those guys is like. What about those that don't really want to change but are mandated? Ooh, yeah. My bread and butter. Absolutely. Can we tag that one? I need to write that down. Now that'll come up. Mandated. Absolutely. We will address that. His partner was willing to help him through his fear. Strong. Very true. We'll go together. Shows what happens with resistance. He's intended to jump, but he had issues, concerns that needed to be overcome. Nice definition, by the way, of resistance. Okay. There's an example of like in the second edition of MI, that was the word. I mean, that's kind of what it is, right? It's resistance. They had a whole debate about this, the authors and the reviewers in the Motivational Interviewing network of trainers around that's what you learned. And that's exactly like so many people have been trained right around the time of the second edition. So this is what we would expect. So I'm a third edition kid. I got trained in MI starting right when the third edition came out. So I got really confused at first because uh, I was hearing language about like rolling with resistance. And I didn't see it anywhere in the text. I'm like, what is rolling with resistance? You know, and and then people are looking at me like, did you even read it? You know, there's been a significant change in the language. Rolling with resistance is still rolling with resistance. It's the same move, right? It's just used with different language. And the reason they ultimately decided to do that has to do with the spirit of motivational interviewing itself. And that's going to be the meat of my presentation today, that um, they really wrestled with it because it didn't feel right to them exactly. Because the spirit of MI is supposed to be, well, unconditional positive regard. And if I refer to my client as resistant, it doesn't quite feel like it is. And so they ultimately decided to break resistance up into two different parts. One is simple ambivalence. And I think that's probably the most important point, that when a person's behavior, especially in a clinical context, like with a mandated client, when it's like they don't do what they say they're going to do, it's not that they're argumentative. That's a different type. It's that you interact with the client. Maybe they're a friendly visitor. I don't know if any of you have heard that phrase before. That somebody who's basically just BSing you, just telling you what you want to hear, just so they can get through it and check off all the boxes. You can see that coming from a mile away. And instead of me thinking, oh, they're just BSing me, the perspective on resistance changes to, they have mixed feelings about doing this. You start there. And, I could probably read back to them what they're actually thinking, but I'm going to deliberately withhold my judgment and just consider the possibility that instead of it being discordant or adversarial, that really they're ambivalent. They might not even know that that's really what's going on. They're feeling a conflict in their head, and it's really a terrible feeling. I mean, you saw what those guys were doing. You saw the first guy that jumped, like he had deep knee bends and he took a big, deep breath. He had a conflict in his mind. He was ambivalent about it. He wanted to do it, and he absolutely did not want to do it. Same thing with mandated. Same thing. I got some more on mandated, but I wanted to stay with ambivalence here. With resistance becomes ambivalence, but also then the other piece is discord. So discord becomes another major word in motivational interviewing, especially when we're talking about working with clients and the relationship breaks down, or it's a confrontational experience. Okay, so how do we know the difference? When the patient or the client stops talking about their change and they start talking about me. So any example that you've probably experienced with, and very much happens with somebody who has been brought to you by somebody else, mandated, right? So they're often, the feeling is very confrontational. So motivational interviewing recognizes this, that is very much a thing. And there's a whole perspective to take on that. There is also, though, the people that say they're all gung-ho and they make a plan with you and they're very enthusiastic and you feel really good about the session. And then in the next session, they didn't do a thing. They agreed to do all of this commitment. They're like, I'll do this, and they didn't do any of it. And then if you're like me, I feel frustrated. Like, well, what was all that work about then? Why did we do, why, I mean, why? Why didn't you do it? That's the first thing I want to say. And I would, resist the impulse to to react in that way and instead consider, if that happens, it's ambivalence until further information is given. It is to consider that if you're not hearing the language of a commitment, that is to say, without me influencing them, do they say, I will do this? Or did I say it first? Right? So what are you going to do? Well, I don't know. That's not a commitment. Because then what I would say next is, oh, well, why don't you go to a meeting? Okay, I'll go to a meeting. See, that's different than from motivational interviewing, where I would meet them where they're at, and it might be very slow. So instead of offering a suggestion, I would stay with the I don't know. IDK, one of the most popular responses from new clients. And that's a whole challenge in and of itself. That might be something worth practicing over these 2 sessions even. Like, what do you do with a client who comes at you with IDK, or a client that comes at you with, are you in recovery? Something like that, where it's just, they're throwing things in your face. There's a way of, and maybe that would be good. I'll just like throw that out to the chat. Maybe we can get concrete about this in the next session, because these are specific situations, and I wanted to be sure to cover the general before we hit into that. I'm seeing a bunch. I'm so tempted to read the chat, but I'm going to leave it up to Steve and Ella, that if you guys can distill that, be my editors. And I will read these in between the sessions, though. So that might be a way to do this too, because I don't want to lose sight of the slides. So I'm going to get back into the slides.
Kevin, we have a Q&A option too, and we have
Excellent.
a question come in.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to, if it's all right, I'd like to avail ourselves of that.
Yeah, there's a Q&A option, and I addressed one question that a viewer had, but I said we might circle back to that.
Okay, cool.
We have some time at the end, so we've got till about 1:30 Central. So we're
Gotcha.
we still have about.
Let me zoom through these slides, and then I want to get into a conversation, because that's just MI, right? The MI is like engagements, but let's do the textbook piece first, and then we'll see how much time we have left today. Another new thing between the 2nd edition and the 3rd edition of MI. So, and there really is only the 3rd edition now. When we say motivational interviewing, we mean that. So this may be new if your training, your experience of MI was from before 2013. For example, the spirit of motivational interviewing. That's not simply my own words to describe a nice way of saying, this is my approach in teaching MI. This is literally a thing now. This is a category of how we envision motivational interviewing as an approach. In other words, think about the definition: a way of approaching a client who has ambivalence about their change. The spirit of MI is generally my style. It's generally speaking, it's my style of how I am with the person in the session. So you see in this slide, these are directly out of the text, the underlying spirit of motivational interviewing. You'll see 4 circles that overlap with each other: compassion, collaboration, acceptance, and evocation. Okay, so let me keep advancing here. Oh, there we go. There's the advance. This is an example of the spirit of MI, even though it has nothing to do with MI. And it's from a gentleman named Gene, who is, he's a relation of my elder, who's my elder. A guy that I hang out with a lot here and talk to in Portland. Storytellers. Okay. He's from the Tlingit Nation. When you talk to people, don't just talk to them, you talk to their spirit. That's how you're going to reach them. That is where they will change, where they will heal. Talk with their spirit. When I consider this, I think about motivational interviewing at its best. In fact, those last words, with their spirit. So not to them, not at them, with them. That really, like, it's like a one-word difference. And yet that is the difference, at least as the way it is presented. This is what they're trying to communicate, that difference between at and with makes all the difference, especially when it comes to ambivalence in a situation. MI is very simple. There are 4 basic moves. Okay, this was a terrible slide. There are 4 pictures there. The pictures are supposed to represent the 4 major moves. It's also known as OARS, O-A-R-S. So you could imagine each one of those pictures is those letters, O-A-R-S. Open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. Anything that you observe in a session where MI is demonstrated, that is all you will see. You will see those 4 activities. There may be others. Those are not MI. MI is OARS, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. There are 4 fundamental processes to MI. This is new also. This is different than the 2nd edition. These go in order. You need to have so those are stair steps, okay? The bottom part is first, engaging, then focusing, then evoking, then planning. If you do nothing but the first step for the first 4 sessions with your client, you are still well within MI. You are still well into engagement. If there is no engagement, there is no focusing. There is no evoking. There is no planning. These are linear, and they are also recursive. So it's not a step-by-step process. I do engaging first, and then we will go to focusing, and then we will go to evoking, and then we go to planning. Sometimes it's that way. Sometimes it's I'm going to engage, and then we will get to a clear focus, and then I will say something wrong, and they'll say, what did you mean by that? And I have to go backwards. I take a step back to engaging in order to repair it. So it is not necessarily purely linear, though it is helpful to describe it in a linear way. And this, again, comes out of the experience of just really it's practice-based evidence from the second edition. In practicing MI as they had it described previously, where there were only 2 chunks to it, there were only 2 phases. They changed it to 4 because of the need to focus. The need to focus. So that in a session with a client, I will be thinking, if I'm thinking MI, I will have in the back of my mind, what are we actually talking about here? What is the change that this person is facing, whether they are mandated or not? What is the focus? That sounds very simple. And if you're like me, when I dove in, I got a coach in MI. I taped myself doing sessions. I thought I was hot stuff. I read the book. I'm like, I already do all this. Let's do it. And then I would play the tape, cringe, play the tape for my coach, who would listen to it. And at the end of 20 minutes, would stop it and say, so what is the focus here? What is the change? And I couldn't answer the question. So they really wanted to, that happened it's very common, very, very common. So that became a fundamental shift in the way that MI is presented. The need to get, ideally, to get concrete. If it can be a behavioral change that's specific, measurable, attainable, and time limited, all the better. Once we have that focus, that's when we hit the MI piece, the part that is unique to motivational interviewing, and that is drawing out from the patient or client their own reasons to make the change. If they give you reasons to not change, there are ways of responding to that in a way that the response from the client will be reasons to change. It is the sole purpose of anything you say at that point. It takes a lot of practice. It's kind of like an art, but I'm nutshelling it here. Very broad stroke. That's kind of what motivational interviewing is about. Here we go again on resistance. This is a big one because it's just the majority of folks out there, in my experience, are just trained before 2013. So that language is out there. Again, it's not bad. Still use the word. You'd still use the word. We're trying to change the shift, the mental shift. That instead of relating to somebody that is resistant, I want to relate to somebody whose language shows arguments for the status quo. Okay, that's in the bottom left of the slide, sustain talk, right? Those are arguments for the status quo. Discord talk is a brick wall. When you hit that brick wall, you know it. It's almost like there's a fire. Why? They're talking about you and they're not happy. Sometimes, this is my theory, sometimes they are happy. They're like way too happy about you. Like they like you a lot. You're amazing. I look at that through a discord lens. Why? Because they're not talking about the target. Or if I'm the target, I want out of that as fast as humanly possible, right? That's not my target. So we need to back up. We're going to have to go back into engaging in some way, shape, or form. So this is a terrible slide too. Oh, it's the poster from That Darn Cat, Walt Disney. I Googled it because of the words darn cat. So you'll notice the word art I put in here in PowerPoint, it goes from the bottom up. Desire, ability, reasons, need, commitment, activation, and taking steps. Acronym, darn cat. So this is probably second edition too. This comes out of psycholinguistic research on how humans make changes. Okay. This is where you'll hear a lot of language around the stages of change and motivational interviewing. So one thing that is, both parties, stages of change and MI, have both been working pretty hard to, they're not broken up with each other. I mean, they're still really close. They're good friends, but they're not married. And it's not the same thing. Like they're not exactly the same. They're actually very, very different from each other. So it is no longer motivational interviewing in the stages of change. That you'll see that everywhere, and that is the way it was. Why? Because they came up at about the same time in history. They were discovering things about how people change, and they found very useful approaches that worked really well together. In fact, they still do. I'm an addictions counselor by trade. I run 3 groups a week full of ambivalent people. Half of them are mandated, and they have their arms folded and their legs out crossed, ankles crossed in the circle. Well, back when we were meeting in person. And I'd ask them, what's your motivation to change, group? Check in. And they'd all go, 10, 10, 10 out of 10. So then I had to fix it and say, okay, so 10 is perfection, let's say. So if you got the poster of Exploring Change Group on your wall at home, and you got a picture of me in your wallet, and you're showing it to your friends going, I'm so stoked about this group and the changes I'm about to make, then you can say you're a 10, okay? Otherwise, you're probably gonna be somewhere between 0 and 10. All right, let's check in. What's your motivation? 10. It just didn't, it was troubling. So MI is different than stages of change. The research is exactly the same research pool. The data that is generated by Paul Ammerhein and many, many others. And there's a bibliography at the end of this slide deck that will be shared, I assure you. Paul Ammerhein is the voice behind the acronym DARN CAT. He noticed in just recording and listening and coding human beings' language when they are making changes, that there's it's like a hill. So the red is uphill and the yellow is downhill. At the beginning of a change process, the language you hear is desire, ability, reasons, and need. And then they kind of hit this moment where they start getting ready to change, and then they make a commitment to change. The language changes. And this is all voluntary language. It's not coerced. They say things like, I went to a meeting yesterday. I will go to a meeting today. I will stop drinking. Okay. Those are examples of the yellow. So DARN CAT. DARN CAT is the acronym. I'm just going to keep going. I want to get through all this. Some more nuggets between the second and third edition. Not the stages of change. The decisional balance, the pros and cons, it's kind of a similar thing. It's actually not recommended to use the decisional balance when the ambivalence is resolved. So if somebody comes in straight off the bat on the first session and says, I'm ready to go. What do I need to do? I'm stopping drinking. I will not drink anymore. And I go, well, let's talk about the reasons, the pros and cons, the reasons to keep drinking, the reasons to stop. That's not where they're at. So we just get, have more of a discerning perspective, because it can become kind of, especially in addictions treatment, like my field, it can be very rote. Like, oh, here's the topic for group tonight, pros and cons, when half the people in the group are already done with that. It needs to be kind of tailored. Great piece of research in 2015 on empathy. Not only is empathy useful and it adds to effectiveness in helping people change, but low empathy hurts people. Low empathy hurts people. In other words, if I'm a low empathy provider, meaning I won't even try, I'm talking about really like severe absence of empathy, I might as well just hand you a self-help book and send you home. Like, that's actually better than if I meet with you. This is where the research is starting to lead us to, well, we're thinking about this. Is it true? I don't know. I'm not really sure how you would measure that, but there's a strong suggestion. Who is making the argument for change in this? That's a great question to ask myself as I go through my conversations with people. Who's doing more work here? Am I the one making the arguments, or am I listening and I'm truly hearing their own arguments for change. It's very inviting to get in there and give them what I see, give them feedback around how I see how much they need to change. The fact is, everyone knows already why they need to change. They already know. The last thing they need actually is another person to tell them why. Instead, let them tell you. Let them tell you. How do we do that? It's through those 4 moves of motivational interviewing: open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And then this final bullet point is about the writing reflex. Writing reflex is the image is a canoe. So you're facing each other in a canoe, and your client pushes down on one side of the canoe, so almost tips it over. What do? You reflexively grab the other side of the canoe and write it, because you don't want to flip over. That kind of vibe happens in sessions where somebody says something that is so obviously not true or not helpful or dangerous that we want to jump in and correct it. It is a natural, universal human reflex, and it ends up becoming one of the key moves of practicing motivational interviewing, is to be aware of it and rein it in as much as possible. Because there's some strong research that shows that when a client experiences that, even well-intended, nicely stated, it's neutral at best and often has a negative experience on the outcome. So it's another way of kind of sparking a thought experiment of, how do I think am I? Steve, I want to check in with you right now. How are we doing on time? And could we do Q&A, or should we just keep going through these? Because I got a lot of it done, like just, theory.
I appreciate that, Kevin. This is great stuff. We're sitting pretty well on time. We're at about 12:50 Central Standard, so we've got about 40 more minutes. If we go a little
Great.
over, that's okay.
Great.
Yeah, right
So-
now the chat is quiet. I think
Okay.
we have a few comments, but I think everyone is seems to be listening. And just so
Great.
you know, we're going to make this presentation available to you. I think Kevin would be willing to share this PowerPoint to maybe
Yes,
PDF
of course.
form. And then we're recording today's event. So we'll have this available in our YouTube HTC archive within a few days, or certainly by next week.
Okay.
We'll have this placed into that archive. I can make that link available to anyone who would like to check this recorded version out, maybe to share it with a colleague or someone that wasn't able to attend today.
Debbie says there's a couple of questions in the Q&A section. Oh, I'm sorry. I see it right here. Q&A. A Native American MI was developed some years ago. Has that been updated too? Yes, it has. Maybe Steve could speak to that. It's one of the projects here.
Yes, we had Kevin and I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Kathy Tomlin on a culturally adapted version to MI called the Spirit of Communication. And this training has been provided. We've also, Kevin and Kathy, or Dr. Tomlin and I were able to pilot this in early 2019 live in McKinleyville, California. That seems like a lifetime ago, Kevin, but
I know.
that is something that we're going to be circling back to as things start to normalize. But I know Dr. Tomlin has done some MI training, not just for our ATTC, but also for our PTTC and our MHTTC departments, to address this very important notion of applying MI into a culturally specific context. So I'm going to leave it at that, but it definitely is out there. And there are some other variations to this as well. Some other entities in the country have also done culturally adapted motivational interviewing curricula.
So I see some questions from Debbie, Deborah, Cassandra. Is there a way to get a copy? Yes. Now you can get a previous edition of, like, well, I think it's just a different animal altogether. Like there's a previous manual for trainers of MI that is just widely available. In fact, you can, frankly, you can just Google motivational interviewing with Native American clients, and you will get, there will probably be two options. There's a lot of activity that has been done on this very issue. And it all starts with a recognition, of course, that the overlap between what we generally just know to be true in ways of knowing in a Native American and Indigenous context that is profoundly similar to the approach of motivational interviewing. The spirit of them seem to be pretty much the same. And that's a whole conversation. And, you know, Steve made reference to, that was a year ago, Steve, almost exactly a year ago. That just seems like I mean, wow. But the conversations that come out of a room of individuals who identify as American Indian, Alaska Native, Indigenous in any way, shape, or form, and or work with them. Their experience of motivational interviewing in this context, when we get specific even to this new edition way of talking about evocation and ambivalence, what that to me is where I would guide this conversation. And this is from my limited experience. To me, that's primacy in any form of attempt to adapt to a context for motivational interviewing. If I notice the need to adapt, then I'm getting humble immediately. It means that I need to listen. I need to listen. Now, that is MI, and yet it's not. There's a very subtle difference in there. And in my opinion, this is not in a slide. This is just from my practice-based experience. It's time for me to do, you know, and just, if there is language coming out of the other person, maybe even if not, I need to sit and really take in what this person is communicating. What the ambivalence could mean is something far different than what I think it means. It could be maybe even ambivalence, not even about the intended focus of the session. Example, drug and alcohol treatment. Somebody comes in, it's written over the door on my office, addiction medicine, and an individual sits down. Have you ever noticed, like if you work in kind of a mixed demographic world, that when a person of Native heritage sits in your office, you can kind of tell, you can kind of feel it? I don't know if anybody's had that experience before. I do. And I don't say anything, except I stay, it's like the MI lens comes even more acute. It's more like, it's not even MI, it's more just person. It's as if there's something different in the room that is of depth. I don't have a lot of words for this because I'm still trying to develop it, but I really would be interested in starting to have a conversation about, do we even change the way we are when we recognize that we're in the presence of a person of Indigenous heritage? I think that's a phenomenal question, and really applying it directly to MI. Why would there even be a difference? Well, I think there is. And it depends completely on who is the person with whom I'm walking. Who is this person? That to me is the answer of treatment. That's the question of treatment in any kind of treatment. Who are you? And yet, I mean, just check that out. That question alone, who are you? That doesn't feel right. That question, if I got asked that question right off the bat by somebody, who are you? I'm not sure I even want to answer the question, right? It's not very evocative. It's not going to warm it up and allow me to feel comfortable enough to share. So there's an art to this. MI is far more a way of knowing, a way of being, a way of listening. And to me, it's just all the more true in working with individuals of Indigenous descent. There was a question that I just feel coming up in me that I saw somebody type previously around trauma and working with individuals with trauma. That's where my slide deck actually goes. And it's directly related to what we're talking about. So I'm wondering if that might be good to do that. And then we can, because I'll finish out the slide deck and then we can kind of come into perhaps more of a conversation. Okay. So here come the slides again. Ooh, I'm getting good at this now. Boom. So, oh, Q&A. Do you see the Q&A window or you just see the slide?
We see the slide, not the Q&A.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
good. We're good.
So here's fancy art that I stole from somewhere. People sticking their head in the ground and COVID is dropping on them. It's an image, you know, kind of colors our experience in the last year. So originally this slide deck was for, you know, just addressing individuals who are in the pandemic, like just how. And what kept occurring to me is that this is so similar to the conversation we're having here, the ATTC network. What are the responses to a sudden trauma and or existential threat? If you include that and or, then we're pretty much talking about everybody. But I fully appreciate that the question was about individuals who have an ACEs score, for example. They have childhood trauma. They have distant trauma, maybe not even fresh trauma. And that maybe they don't even know it. Maybe they do know it, but that's not the reason they're here. How do we approach that from a motivational interviewing point of view? Trauma. I got to see my little word art. Fight. There it is. I like that picture. So this is an example of what MI is not. This is intended to be an illustration of perhaps this might be what somebody is experiencing when they're in the room with me, and it might have nothing to do with me. This might be what this person experiences every day. This is the fight or flight response. Peace out. You know, if this is somebody I'm working with, well, I'm just going to presume it is. This is trauma-informed care, right? It's like universal precautions in the ER. Put on your PPE. Even before the pandemic, it was treat everyone as if a bloodborne pathogen is in the room. So I'm going to put on my PPE. Well, that's kind of the idea behind trauma-informed care, is that even if I don't even know this person, anything about them, I don't know their name, I am going to presume that trauma is applicable to the case. Why? So this doesn't happen. So I don't re-traumatize them. So I don't harm them even more. Or at minimum, just have them get into a mode where they're triggered and they want to run away. And well, not want to. A lot of people want to run away and they don't. That's okay. That's good treatment. If they do run away, you know, trauma-informed care. Oh, and then there's freeze, fight, flight, or freeze. I'm not here, I'm not here, I'm not here. Look over there. So, and then this discussion, I think, is perhaps this is where these webinars are headed. You know, then what? You know, okay, here's MI, then what? Well, the spirit of MI from the 3rd edition, that's the kind of the new segment to the 3rd edition. And this is the reason why the spirit was added as a concrete category. You know, not just a new agey thing to say. It's not intended to be that at all. It's intended to be, this is what we mean. So here's a direct answer to the question around trauma. There was a piece of research done. I have the citation in the back of the slide deck. Effective modifications to MI actions. So for example, you remember back to ORs, right? Open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. Those are the four main moves of MI. What they found was that modifying my four main moves is really what it will look like when it comes to a trauma-informed or anything else informed approach where I need to adjust for context, particularly with mindfulness that I do not want to harm this person further. Closed and open questions. So ORs then becomes CORs. You can ask any question. And honestly, that really is becoming more and more just the accepted norm. The reason that open questions were emphasized so much is that we tend to ask closed questions. And why isn't that great for MI? Because you get one word answers. And what we want is words. You know, the psycholinguistic research, they can't code words that aren't there. So I would like to hear you tell me your story. And that's an art to say the thing that will empower you to give me this sacred thing that I'm asking for. You can ask a closed question. If somebody is hurting, if somebody is scared, if somebody is frozen, ask. Maybe it kind of brings it back up to the surface, right? Maybe it's a process-oriented question. Maybe it's just that, are you okay right now? That's a yes or no question. And sometimes I'll ask a closed question when I know the answer is no. Why? Because it's empowering. When somebody says no, I feel power. You know, my favorite thing to do, especially when we're over the phone, working from home, I got a schedule full of patients every day. I call them up. They all pick up the phone. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. I'd really love to hear that. Have you noticed that more people show up to your sessions during the pandemic? We certainly have. We certainly have. The number of clients has not really changed. It feels like it has. The reason it feels like it has is because they're all showing up. Our no-shows are like 0 right now. And we feel like we're having double the load. It's trippy. So my favorite closed question, ring, ring, they pick up the phone. Hello? Hi, it's Kevin at Kaiser. Is this a bad time? Is this a bad time? That's the question. Just real quick, is this a bad time? What's the answer? Well, it's either yes, which is a great thing to know, or no, this is fine. Check out the difference, because I was saying, this is from my supervisor, plug for supervision, shout out to supervision. They hear me saying, is this an okay time to talk? Sure, why not? Versus, is this a bad time? No, there's a difference there. It sounds different. It's little things like that they're like little seeds of evocation, right? Because we have traction on the first question. So anyway, allow the client to control how they prefer to communicate. Elicit maximum appropriate choices from the client about their communication. Give them choices. You know, I'm sure that, you know, amongst the folks who are here listening to this today, between us all, we have many ways of doing that art. Short sentences, simple language, concrete and clear. Check for understanding immediately. I mean, this is the basics of trauma-informed approaches, right? Why not incorporate this into MI? I don't even know if I'd call it a modification. It's just more, be more mindful, be more, trauma-informed. Understand what that means, and that it translates into this kind of behavior, right? The kindness route, the route of a gentler, softer way of doing exactly the same work. Oh, there's the research right there. You'll get the slides for sure. There's the spirit again. So notice here in these, I think one is from the book and the other is just colorful. The top three circles, compassion, partnership, and acceptance, that is Carl Rogers. Okay, that's the Carl Rogers approach. Unconditional positive regard, that's person-centered counseling. The red circle is what makes MI. As far as I could tell, there's no other model that does that. There's no other model that includes evocation as a necessary component of effective work. So that my mission in life, in addition to being compassionate, collaborative, accepting, is to be evocative in my way of being with a person. Why? Because the people I work with are full of ambivalence. This is why. So the concrete activities of MI are very much aimed at this piece of evocation. Well, how do I do that? What does that look like? And that's what we're going to be aiming at for the rest of today and the next session. You know, how has your practice changed since the pandemic? That's really what this is about. Speak with their spirit. So this piece on acceptance, I put a big star on that because the way that the book treats these four circles is they spend an entire chapter on acceptance and actually break acceptance down into 4 A's, right? It starts getting a little bit wordy. It's very simple. It's just about being accepting. Accurate empathy is a necessary ingredient for evocation. Okay. Again, though, this is Carl Rogers. Okay. This is like just colors. The red is the addition of evocation. Spirit of MI, those first three are not new at all. This is where we recognize it. You know, if I see a demonstration of MI, oh, I do that. So here's the fun response to that, by the way. Yes, you do. You do MI, even the evocation part, you do. We just want you to do it all the time. That's really hard to do. It's really hard to do. This is where it becomes an art. You know, the masterful practitioners of MI, you know, many demonstrations, which might even be worth looking at a little bit next time or something. When you see them talking, it doesn't look like they're really doing much different at all. And yet, think about it. How did they know to say that? And then think that everything that they're doing in their mind is aimed at getting out of or drawing out of the person their own reasons to make the change. And to make it even more confusing in the text, they change the ors to ears. When you get into the evocation mode. Why? Well, they want to emphasize that it's about evocation. Evocative questions. What's an example of an evocative question? What are your reasons to change? That literally counts. Sometimes it even works really well. You know, I forgot to start with a mindful moment. May we continue to work toward these ideals of person-centered approaches even in these times. May we know our limits and know when to apply these principles of compassion, acceptance, and community to ourselves, and maybe even give ourselves a break here and there. Self-care becomes a huge part of this. So I think that might be all of the content here. Oh, here's the plug for later, right? This is where it's like an infomercial. Well, I recognize this. I want to get better at it. How do I do it? Well, we got an idea about that. So I could send you the slides if you want that. So that's what I got. We got a little bit of time maybe for a little Q&A? Would love to.
If it's possible, we,
Andra, yes, I'll send, we can, just keep marinating on this because we come back on February 17th. And I think that's actually a really good idea, you guys, to have one and then have a gap and then have the follow-up. Because now if you're ambivalent, say, about this, you get to mull it over, come up with some good questions. You got my email. If you don't, I'll send it to you right now in the chat. You can ask me questions. I'm happy to answer any and all questions, even if the answer is I don't know.
are we able to, can we open mics? Can folks chime in if they'd like to?
Looks like Lynn's there.
Yeah, I see her. I'm gonna mute and let Lynn ask a question.
Hi, Lynn. Is that her? I'm not hearing.
Lynn, are you there?
Maybe not.
Mic's not working. I'll go ahead and message her and see if we can get that working.
Okay.
If anyone else would like to speak, please feel free to raise your hand or post your questions in the chat box.
How about that question about the next session, you guys? February 17th, links, all that stuff.
So we'll have, I don't know if we've put out the registration link yet for the next series in February, but if you are on our listserv or would like a link to our webpage, we do blast out an announcement each week with the upcoming events for that week. So I'm not sure if we have the registration set and advertised yet in our schedule. Ella, do you know that?
Yeah, I just posted that in the chat, and I will also post the link for our listserv in case you're interested in any of our other events too.
Yeah, I did sign up for that, by the way, Ella, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, once you're in, Kevin, on that, you can't get out. So I did.
Yeah, that's probably why I was ambivalent in the first place. The pros outweigh the cons, though.
Well, let's see. Lynn sounds like she's maybe having some mic issues. Lynn, if
Oh,
you
yeah,
check,
she's right there.
yeah, if you can check down in your corner. Okay, it looks like she's
All right.
her mic back. Okay.
Hi, this is Linda. And
Linda.
I didn't realize that you were calling on me. Thank you. I think you actually haven't answered my question, but I wanted to share this because I think you made a point that that was really kind of helpful for me. My education, if you will, my professional education is MSW. And social work practice has a principle that really states that people are of value for no other reason than they're being human beings. And that as a human being, we really have this inner knowledge that of what's right for us, of what we need to do, and so I came to motivational interviewing and I learned motivational interviewing with that background, with that in mind. And my question had been, does that still apply? And I think you really answered that. Indeed, it does. But if I even think about the word motivational interviewing, when I first learned it, I was bothered by the quote unquote interviewing part.
Yes.
But I saw that we are through dialogue with someone, not to someone or at someone, but with someone, as you stated, we're motivating them to find that inner knowledge. Our conversation with them really is about them coming to their own recognition of that knowledge that is there for everyone, no matter how dysfunctional their behaviors might be. That inner knowledge is there. And that really helped me. And I do think that still applies. And so I'm asking, do you agree? Is that what you've shared? And that really hasn't changed, whether you are learned the language of,
Right.
edition 2 or edition 3. Is that
Exactly.
correct?
So first of all, I can just tell that you listen deeply to your clients. I'm guessing, Linda, that even, you learned it from a book maybe at the very beginning, and yet this comes from your experience of working with your clients. It just leaps out at you when you have the experience that the wisdom is right there.
It is. Yeah,
That's a
it
beautiful thing. I think you put it in perfect words, better than the text. In fact,
is.
you're kind of almost quoting it like absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, that's a way to look at it, that really it's like we always hear around like counseling stuff, that so much of it will come down to how can I get out of the way of this person doing what they need to do to find who they are, to
Yeah.
find that piece that can do this.
Right.
Yeah, I got to be there. It has to be relational. In fact, that's another good point. Some research on motivation. It's relational. It is always in the context of my relation to something else. It's not just something that's in here that I can go reach down and pull out myself. It has to be while I'm engaged with my life, my world, the things outside of my hula hoop, right? It's relational. So all my relations. I mean, it's so much overlap, So I just really appreciate you highlighting that, Linda, because it really is the essence of what we're talking about.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make sure I was still understanding things, and hopefully that would help somebody else,
Absolutely.
because it really made a difference for me is to recognize that.
What I love
Thank
is
you.
that, thank you, Linda. I'm involved with other people who are really interested in MI and getting good at it and practicing it. It's like a network of people. And even if it's the same stuff, it's like not anything different than what we're talking about right now. And yet, when we talk about and share our experience and our challenges with each other, it's motivating. We do the same thing with each other. It's more of just sometimes even a vocation. Like we'll recognize somebody needs to make a change and we'll start drawing it out, and they'll even know it. That's so crazy that it's not a hidden thing. It's totally transparent. And that's another way of like, okay, what are the dangers of MI? We can get into this next time too. Like there are ethical limits to this. They can be profoundly misused because it is incredibly powerful. You are accessing another person's most sacred place, the place that they keep hidden often and for good reason, a lot of times. Vulnerability means I give you permission to hurt me. So no, I mean, it's like plutonium. It can be very dangerous. This is why, I appreciate a structured way of doing it. It's quite possible to just go be person-centered. My personality is kind of that way. That's why I'm a counselor. I like the work, kind of naturally drawn to it. And I run into all kinds of quagmires in working with human beings. And so just having a network of people, having a supervisor, having just and being fully upfront and having a commitment to an ethical practice that is transparent. So there's no tricks. And you hear that sometimes when we talk about MI, there's critics of MI, kind of older language, older articles, and that it really is a form of manipulation. When done wrong, absolutely. Absolutely. There was an ad somewhere for a salesperson, I think it was jewelry, who one of the requirements of the job description was skilled in motivational interviewing. So what's the target there? What's the target when I'm working? I mean, there you go. It's a target. I'm going to use these powerful skills of, frankly, intimacy in a professional way in order to get them to buy jewelry? That does not feel quite right. And yet that happened.
Yeah, that's like a transactional abuse of that approach, Ken.
Absolutely.
This is great dialogue. I have a question I want to put out there that came through the Q&A, and
Oh, okay, great.
I'm not sure I quite understand the wording that the author has provided, but I want to just see if I can interpret this right. He or she is asking, I think this is directed to you. Are you suggesting that people are more ambivalent, thus need to adapt to Native American people? I think that's what they're trying to say. But I'm not sure if I am understanding that right. If the author is,
Where is it? Is it on the Q&A?
it is. They're referencing
Oh, I got it. I got
white.
it.
So
Native people are more ambivalent. But Native people are more ambivalent as like a type of person?
well, then it says, thus they need to adapt to Native American people. So the question is a little confusing.
Oh, I see. Well, I could answer, I'll just go with that interpretation. Okay. And if we're wrong, please let's clarify what the question is, but I would not suggest that there is a degree of ambivalence. It gets kind of binary. If I'm facing a choice about a change in my life that's an important change, and I am not committed to it, I am ambivalent. How do I know that I'm ambivalent? Well, it's do I have feelings both for and against at the same time? That's it. It's a simple thing. So from my personal point of view, and also from the motivational interviewing point of view, there is not a gradation of ambivalence. Is it there? And that actually that's an important question. This would be one of the places where it's inappropriate to use MI when there is no ambivalence. So when there's a mandated person and you kind of get a whiff that they're not ambivalent in the slightest, it happens. Like they're just committed to still doing whatever they're doing. Ask them. Sounds like you've already made a decision about this. And typically you'll get the answer. And if they have already committed to it and you test all that out, there you go. That's the outcome. Maybe they were not ambivalent at the beginning and whatever, somebody, if they're mandated, they have to go through the process, but they get to you and they're not ambivalent, I will be re-referring them back to their PO. And that will be transparently done, right? And these are rare cases, but it happens. I would rather go to prison than do treatment. Now, that's a whole, wow, what's behind that decision? There's a lot there. So I would suggest it's one of these universals. Ambivalence is like death, anxiety, freedom, psychological freedom. There's no obvious meaning written in the English language in the sky. It's just one of the conditions of being a person. There are types of ambivalence, but I would not attempt to generalize around types of people with this. I think that, and I don't know of that being written anywhere. So I hope that gets at the question, because and there may be something about the need to adapt to Native American demographics. That to me is my point for today. Like do we? And if we do, how? And then that's where I'd like us to listen to each other, because I think that there's a wealth of experience here on doing exactly this. And I know that there's, I've done a couple of these, and in the past, there's been some feedback around, well, I didn't get really anything concrete to do with Native folks. Well, I'm probably not going to do that. I'm not going to tell you what to do specifically, concretely, and yet, it's a dicey thing to speak in a broad way about types of people. So that's where I'm just very aware of that. And that's where I always start with humility. You know, what are our definitions of these words? I mean, that's just a drug and alcohol treatment thing with group. We have to define our words, because I can say one word and there can be 12 different definitions of that word in the room.
Yeah.
So I hope that helps that question. You know, I appreciate the question and I'd like to lean into it more if we missed it. Okay. I am aware of the time too. So we've got a couple minutes left.
Yes, we are
Kevin.
approaching the bottom of the hour, so we've got time for maybe another comment or so, and then we want to honor everyone else's schedules as well.
Linda.
There are times when someone may express ambivalence, but they don't really understand they have an ambivalence, correct?
Oh.
I mean, they may, if you have somebody that says, I'm all in, I'm ready to make this change, but the activity is not happening, then I think you do have to explore what's
Absolutely.
happening.
And you will typically see that. Like if you get to the point where you're going to do that test, it sounds like you've already made your choice. Sometimes, I'd say most of the time, with that direct question, there'll be a, whoa, don't get me wrong. Okay, then you're back, right? You're back to ambivalence. Sometimes they'll say, I absolutely am committed to this. Well, and this is, again, straight out of text-based MI. I don't just stop at the first utterance of a commitment. It's not like I'm chomping at the bit for them to just finally give in and say, okay, I'll do it. And then I run out of the room. No, it's, they might tell me this up front. It might be 3 sessions down the road. How do I know? Exactly right, Linda. I look at their behavior. And though, I will also say, I'm not just listening for one sentence, I'm listening to all their language. So anytime they give me language about the focus, about that specific thing, was that a desire statement? Was it an ability statement? Was it a reason statement? Was it a need statement? Was it a commitment? See, they might say, I'm committed. And then you hear a bunch of desire, ambivalence. We can get into this because this is like, this is like the art of listening. Once you get this, it's trippy. It's like seeing the matrix for what it is. When people start talking about their change and they think they're convinced that they're committed, and then all you hear, it's like this. You're standing at the altar with your betrothed. The justice of the peace is there and says, do you take this person to be your spouse? And the person says, I want to. I could. I got a lot of reasons to. That shotgun in the corner, you know, I think I could. Are they going to accept that? They're only going to accept I will. We're different than the justice of the peace, though, in that they might say I will, and then we're going to stay with them. You know, that's where the analogy stops. We're going to stay in that conversation and kind of test it. So, really good point, Linda. Thank you. Okay. I think that brings us to an end for today. So, February 17th, please percolate. Send me questions.
Yes, Kevin, thank you so much. We've taken a vote and we've decided to ask you back next month so you are, you're in. Excellent. You've been voted in. Thank you everyone else for joining, and we will see you again on the 17th. Ella, thanks for getting us started, and Kevin, my friend, thank you so much. Stay safe and healthy, and take care of that little guy of yours.
Absolutely. Will do. Okay. You guys have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Bye-bye.
You will be redirected to a GIPRA survey after this. If you could take just a couple minutes and fill that out, that would be such a great help to our center. I have posted many links, and you will also be getting the chat in our follow-up email. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we will see you in our next event. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Yes, Tammy, you can request CEUs and we will accommodate. So you just need to make that request to our office and we'll get those to you. Okay.
Cool. Take care.
Hi, in case anyone's still on that's wondering about CEUs, you will get a follow-up email with the CEU request instructions. So just keep an eye out for the follow-up email and you will have access to order those. So no worries. Thank you guys so much. Have a good one.